All right, so let's talk about living with other people, and it's a very important part of school. If you're this section is going to be on people who are going away to school, you're going to be living in a dorm or an apartment building, or living with other people. And usually in the beginning of your career, or even if you're living at home and you're commuting to school, eventually you might want you get an apartment and move out. And if you're going to be living with other people, it's just some ground rules and some things that could be taken care of before they become problems. And so if you're taking notes on any of this stuff, the key thing to understand is to handle as much stuff before it comes up. It's much easier to handle problems and handle situations before they come up than after they come up. After they come up, then it tends to be an argument. Before it comes up, then there's not as much emotion involved and you can figure things out. So it's just how it goes. So sometimes, by the way, I've lived with people in college that became my best friends. I'm still friends with to this day, and it was because we had a great living situation. And there was some people different years of college who I couldn't believe I lived with, and it was awful. And the last thing you want to happen is to have to spend a year, and especially when you're especially a freshman year or a sophomore year, when your grades are when you're really adjusting to the transition from high school to college, and then the worst thing is then you don't even want to go home because you don't want to be around your roommate, or you don't want to be at your house, so at your home where you're sleeping, where you're going to spend most of your time, or at least a good portion of your time. So you want to set some ground rules right off the bat, okay? And I've seen that happen many times. So looking at my notes here, key to avoiding these problems is to lay down some rules, okay? And when I say make some rules, make some ground rules, the first day or even before you go to the college, see if you get the person's phone number and talk about how you're going to handle different situations, which I'm going to go through all different situations, in a minute. But what do I mean? Now, when I say laying down some rules, especially as a college student or high school student, it's like, oh my God, rules! I hate rules. Well, you need to have some boundaries. You need to have some rules. And I don't mean you walk into the dorm the first day and you go, "Are you my roommate?" Well, there's going to be some rules around here. Okay, like that's not going to be a good way to start that conversation. But the way you should approach the conversation is. Yeah, hey, by the way, hey, nice to meet you. Great, we're living together. I'm excited. Where are you from? All that kind of stuff. Hey, here's the thing. Just so I don't know how you are. I just want to make sure this year goes really well and we have a great time together, living together. So, let's just talk about some things real quickly and just lay down how we want the room to go. Just so we have some guidelines to go by. Would you be up for that? Okay, so something like that. So something where the person where you can get that line of communication open, and you want to have those rules taken care of right in the beginning. So what are some guidelines you're going to talk about? First of all, decorating the room. Okay, decorate the room, putting a TV in the room, computer in the room. What you're going to have on the walls, all that kind of stuff. What kind of music? Like if you're listening to heavy metal and they're a big hip hop and rap person, well, you don't want to be blaring the music all the time. So. And we'll talk about that as well. But decorating, for example, my sophomore year, I lived with Bob. Okay, my roommate Bob. Now, when I moved in, I didn't know Bob beforehand, and I'm a very large person. I was playing football, and I think he was a little intimidated by me and a little scared. Now, personally, I'm someone who you give me a bed and a wall and a desk and a dresser, and I'm fine. I don't need decorations. I could comfortably live in a prison cell if it wasn't actually prison. Okay, so the point is that I don't need anything on the walls. But Bob wanted to decorate, but he didn't know how to approach me, and he was a little nervous about approaching me. And so, like every once in a while, I'd come into the room, and there'd be a picture up on the wall, and he'd be like, is it okay if I put the picture up? And I'm like, yeah, dude, that's fine. Okay. And then another day he would do something else, and then like a week would go by and there'd be a rug, and I'd be like, oh, did you put this rug there? He's like, yeah. He's like, is that okay with the rug? I'm like, that's fine. Yeah, whatever. Okay. And then eventually I was just like, dude, do you want to decorate the room and stuff? And he was like, yeah, I would love to. And I'm like, great. Well, go ahead, decorate my side. I don't care what you do. As far as that goes. And so. So what are you going to put up on the walls? What kind of decorations? Who's going to bring the TV if you're going to have a TV in the room? The use of the computer if you both bring a computer. If you don't need a computer, if you're bringing a laptop, all those types of things. Like who's going to be doing these types of things? I remember Dave Cush and Mario Pintato, you know, they brought a couch into, they had a dorm room, literally a dorm room, and they decorated it to, they lofted the bed, and they had a couch under there, and they had a table that came out, that they put stuff in, that they built, you know, and they color matched everything to the walls, and, you know, it was just a really cool, that was the place to hang out, to go into that room and hang out, because they had decorated the room so well. So, but that's up to you guys. You know, that's something you want to discuss. You know, hey, who needs this? Do we need that? Do we need this? And who's going to get it? And who's going to bring it? And how are we going to use it? All right. Here's another thing you need to go over with a roommate is borrowing each other's stuff. Okay, so this could really turn into a problem if you don't address it right in the beginning. Okay, so like clothes, especially for women, you know, if you're the same size, you know, she takes my clothes, I take her clothes, like you want to address that. Okay, and guys too, you know, guys don't really share clothes as much, but you know, hey, is it okay for me to do this or do that? And if you're cool with them, you know, people using your clothes, or you just say, hey, you know, if you're gonna, I don't mind if you borrow my clothes as long as you ask me first, or if you want to borrow anything of mine, as long as you ask me first, just don't take anything without asking me. You know, you lay that out right in the beginning. Food, okay, well, girls might be clothing, guys, it's food, okay, especially if you're living in an apartment with other people, you know, hey, is this my food? What's okay to eat? What's not okay to eat? There's nothing worse than you coming home and your roommates have chowed on your food, okay, and you're like ready to eat something and it's gone. You know, that could cause some hostility in the place. Okay, so that's just how it goes. So. Are you going to have communal food? Is everybody going to pitch in for food and someone's going to go shopping every week, or are you going to rotate that? Like, how are you going to handle the food situation? Is everyone just going to buy their own food, or are you going to have communal food? All right, so that's something that you need to know. Staying up, music and like staying up late and parties, whether it's in the apartment or in the room or having people over, which we'll talk about also, should be discussed, okay? You know, Thursday night at some colleges considered party night, okay? But in some colleges, every night is considered party night. So, so if you're a student in a dorm and you're having and maybe you take early classes, and remember, your roommate doesn't have the same class schedule as you do. So, so you may want to look at each other's schedule and say, look, you know, these days I have to be up early. You know, we got to go to, you know, I got to be asleep by this time, okay? And so. So these are things that, you know, need to be gone over. You know, so at this time on these days, I'm going to be going, I need to go to sleep, or I need to get my sleep, because again, some people don't realize that they're, you know, that they're doing anything wrong. It's like, well, and then if you don't handle that beforehand, it's like, well, it's my room too. What do you mean I can't make noise in my room? I can't have people over my room. It's my room, okay? And then you're like, well, yeah, it's my room as well. I want to sleep in my room. So again, things that can be handled beforehand. Another big issue when we talk about getting up is an alarm clock, okay? You know, who's going to handle the alarm clock? I remember one of my roommates had a friend who was in crew, okay? And the crew team would go out at like, they literally had to be on the water at like 5:30, 5 o'clock, and his alarm would go off every morning, okay? And sometimes he would hit the alarm, hit snooze, get out of bed, leave, okay, and then 10 minutes later after he's gone, the alarm goes off again, and then, you know, at 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, and he had to like wake up, find the kid's alarm, you know, and turn it off, okay, so, you know, just having the alarm clock, you know, when is it, what time do you have to get up tomorrow? Hey, I'm going to be up early. Make sure you're careful with the snooze button as far as that goes, okay? Having people over, I kind of talked about that a second ago, but really having people over, like, you know, if your roommate falls in love, okay, you know, is the girl or the guy, like, you all of a sudden you have it's supposed to be a 2-person room, turns into a 3-person room, okay? So that has to be, hugely should be addressed beforehand, okay? So it's like, hey, if somebody wants to come over, or if they're going to stay over one night, that's fine. I don't really want someone staying over. You know, I don't have anybody that's coming over. I don't know if you plan on having, like, you know, somebody has a girlfriend or friends that come. You know, if your friends come from out of town and they're going to stay one night or 2 nights, fine. But I don't want to be living with other people. If you get a girlfriend or a boyfriend, you know, I don't want to have 3 people in the room, okay? So you know, can we make that pact right now before we even start that, you know, 1 or 2 nights a week is okay, or no nights is okay, or, you know, I'm okay if 3 people stay here, okay? But again, these things need to be hammered out beforehand, so that way later on, you know, now it's not like, well, it's my room, why can't my boyfriend stay over or my girlfriend stay over? you know, whenever I want, you know. And so now you can address that. Okay, remember we spoke about that at the beginning of the semester. All right. Here's a big one: cleaning up. Okay, like cleaning up the room. All right. No one is the same neat level as somebody else. Okay, so you know, as far as cleaning up goes, like what level? Now, if you're okay with having clothes and stuff all over the place, and they're okay with having clothes and stuff all over the place, then that usually works out. But you know, sometimes it's like, well, it's my stuff, so it's okay if it's everywhere. But when you see other stuff laying around, it kind of bothers you. So you just got to talk to them. It's like, well, hey, are you going to set up a chore list? Is it like, hey, you just keep your side of the area clean? Here's my side will be clean. Or if you have a communal area, like when are we going to clean the living room? Who's taking out the trash if you're living in an apartment? Okay, you know, who does the dishes? Holy cow! You want to talk about fights? Okay, dishes and sinks, okay, are huge. All right, you know, because especially if you're living with 4 or 5 people, you know, you might want to set rules with everyone and say, hey guys, when you're done when you're done eating something, it needs to be washed within a day. Okay, so or whatever, you know, it has to be washed immediately right afterwards. But you know, that's kind of tough sometimes for some people who don't wash things right away and are used to leaving a sink. But I remember in college, you know, having like literally 6 guys I lived with, and the sink was just a mess always, and it was awful. It was really terrible. So and nobody wanted to do it, because then why am I the one that's cleaning up everyone else's stuff? And that's what everybody felt. So therefore, the whole sink is a mess. All right. So these are things that can be handled before they come up. All right. So here's another one. Drinking. Okay. Alcohol, drugs, that kind of stuff. Okay. Again. This could be a touchy subject. I'm not gonna, obviously, you know, my stance is, you know, I've never done any kind of drug. I've drank in college, you know, as far as that goes, but it's something that you need to discuss with your roommates. Okay, you know, what is the situation? What are we going to allow? What are we not going to allow? And you have to make that decision. I mean, your parents aren't going to be there. It's you. It's your life, and you have to decide on what you feel comfortable with and what you don't feel comfortable with. And just express that. And if you express it before anything happens, it's a lot easier to deal with. Then at least people know your stance and where you are, as opposed to you know, busting in a room and being like, what the hell's going on in here? And especially if you're an athlete, or you're you know, you're responsible. It's your house. So if there's drugs in the house and cops come in, or you're raided or something like that happens, you're in the house. It's your part of your house. You are an accomplice to that. So you have to put that into consideration. And even if you're in your own room and somebody's doing something, you know, illegal in a different room, you're in the house. Okay, so that's something that you also need to talk to people. Again, it only takes one person to mess up, you know, everybody else. All right, so next one here is paying stuff. Now this isn't as much as when you're in a dorm, but if you are going to be living in an apartment or an off-campus housing or something like that, you know, how are you going to pay for stuff? How are you going to pay the utility bill? Who's going on the lease, okay, of the building? Let me give you a tip, since you're on my video and you're, you know, paying me to see this, okay? You do not want to be on the lease if you don't have to be, because if you're on the lease, you're in charge, okay? You're responsible. If you're not on the lease, you're not responsible. Now, well, let me rephrase. You could just understand, if you're on the lease, you are responsible for everything, okay? So if you're the person who's on the lease and all of a sudden, and then you have 4 other people living with you who aren't on the lease, and they bail on you or they disappear, you're responsible to pay their rent. You're responsible if your name is on any utilities, okay? So like utility bills, all that kind of stuff, have somebody else put it in somebody else's name, okay? If you can. You don't want to mess up, because there's nothing worse. And then how you're going to pay these things, by the way, okay? When is it due? Set times and dates. You know, by this time, everyone needs to pay their rent, or everyone needs to pay this. So you're not floating other people. Causes a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety and a lot of hatred to, you know, cause a lot of problems in households when you're worried about, like, how come you haven't paid your rent? And you don't want to be, and especially if, you know, if you're the person on the lease and you're responsible, and you're like, well, you know, you need to pay your rent, and you're the bill collector. All of a sudden you become a bill collector to the people who live in your house. You don't want to do that, okay? You got other things to do. You got to study. Telephone bill. Well, now everyone has cell phones, so that's something that we don't have to worry about so much anymore. But utilities, is something that you got to worry about as far as communal. If you're going to get cable, paying the cable bill and sharing that. Anything that you have to share. Make sure everybody understands. Here are the clear-cut rules. Here's when the money's due, and you got to get it by that time. Or you come up with some kind of consequence. All right, so really important. So that's about it. That's all I got. And I'm sure there's other things that you could probably think of yourself, but those are the main ones that I came up with, how you're going to handle and how you're going to be living with other people. And just remember, when you're dealing with other people, that they're not you, and there's things that there are things that might bother you that might not bother someone else. So just remember, as I said in the beginning, handle things before they come up. The more things you can look at, and you could potentially find problems and handle them. Parking, I just thought that's another thing that just popped into my head, like a driveway. If you're a junior or a senior and you have your car on campus, how are we setting up the parking arrangements? How are we going to is everyone's keys going to be there? Do we have a spare set of keys so people can move their cars? Okay, so who's parking on the street? If there's if there's 3 cars but there's only 2 spaces, who's parking in the street? Who's not parking in the street? Okay, if we have morning stuff, like I have morning class or a morning job, and I got to get out. How do I move your car? Who comes in last? Okay, these are all things that you don't think would bother you, but again, if you don't handle them beforehand, if you don't handle them right in the beginning, right up front, you get a lot of challenges later on. So talk to your roommates. Make sure everything runs a lot smoother when you've handled all these situations before they come up.